Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers of happiness, joy, and a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation, and we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So I was sitting at work yesterday, and I get a text out of the blue from my ex-business partner.
Oh, dear. I always feel like there's a good story whenever that name is popping up.
Well, yeah, so he sends me a picture of, during our, I don't know, like the height of our disagreeing about how we're, like running the company and such.
The height of your discontent.
Right. One of our employees like photoshopped this image of like me and him like fighting, like pulling each other's hair. They like photoshopped our face on like these two people like pulling each other's hair and like fighting like brats or something. And
Ugh.
I have no idea why he sent it to me. I was like so random and so weird. And but it really threw me off for the rest of the day.
Did it?
Yeah. Like I didn't expect, it was like I was happily going along my day, and then like boom, here's this text from the past with like an image that really like, which I really remember like being upset by.
Yeah.
And so it really knocked me off for the day.
Yeah. Then what happened after that? Like, did you get any context about why that was sent, or just?
Oh, no, he just said he was like going through old photos because one of his kids is graduating. So he's like putting together like the graduation photo board or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And he found that one, and he decided to send that to me.
Oh, man.
I stewed on it the whole day. Like, I didn't text him back. I didn't do anything. I just kind of was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Oh, what came up for you? What you said triggered? What came up for you?
Yeah, it was mostly that like during that time, it's like, we were kind of fighting, right? So it's an accurate picture. But like I didn't really want to
You've never had long hair.
Yeah, right. But I didn't really want to be fighting, and and like I didn't like that. Yeah, I didn't like the team was sort of like poking fun at the whole thing. And it just I felt like really trapped. So so that like image sort of crystallized how like a not real great time in my life.
Yeah.
So
what feelings came up for you?
To repress it.
Well, what feelings came up for you specifically, do you think? Could you identify them or not really? You just felt uncomfortable. Like, were you embarrassed? Were you mad? Were you?
No, I wasn't mad. It is more like embarrassed. Like I just kind of felt like embarrassed that like our little partnership spat, like it was like poor leadership. To me, the reason I think I was embarrassed is because it was like poor leadership, right? Like, like I don't know what else I could have done. Really, maybe if I was like fast forward to the day, I would have handled it a bit different.
Sure.
But it's just like I'm, this feud between me and my business partner is affecting the business and the team.
Yeah.
And that was really the thing that I felt like kind of the most shame about.
That's a strong word. I was just thinking about it. It's like, how many times are we triggered by something that's happened in the past? And I think that even though we try our best to move past things, I think there's always unresolved things, or, for unless we're really intentional, there's always going to be a little leftover dirt in the corner somewhere,
Oh yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because I'm kind of like over the whole thing. It's not like a thing I really ever think about or
until it gets thrown
ruminate on. And then you're just like, Yeah,
thrown in your
yeah. You
phone.
get that. You're just like you're saying. Like you're right. Like, you're like, ooh, there are still little cobwebs around here.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think we naturally judge ourselves for it. But how often do you think that happens? Like, that was a huge, huge, huge example for you. But I think
Hmm.
everybody has, like, in my coaching, I have these conversations all the time. There's just a lot of stuff that will pop up from our past. And I feel like it's almost funny, like, the more you are self aware and working on yourself actively, when something like that happens, I feel like it's almost more triggering sometimes
Mm.
because you immediately go back to those old feelings that you had
Hmm.
and you feel way worse for a moment,
Yeah.
um, because it's such a bad feeling compared to how you naturally feel now, having worked on yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. It was like for a little bit, for maybe like an hour or something. It was like
Yeah.
a time machine. Like I went
Mm.
back in time
Wow.
for like a little while.
Yeah.
And then I
I think
realized like,
that's
okay, just snap out of that and let's get back to like right now.
that's hard though.
Uh,
I mean, it's awesome that you notice it because what if you hadn't? A lot of
mm-hmm.
people wouldn't notice. They would just get that sucker gut. It's like a gut punch,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, I was talking with one of my clients yesterday, and she was talking about how there's always a desire to kind of beat herself up in order to prove to herself that she's worthy of the results that she's getting.
Hmm.
And um, and I think that this also goes back to these past triggers and these past traumas
Mm-hmm.
where something in our system taught us a certain way, like we were a certain way. And then
Mm-hmm.
through experiences, we morph and change, but we get stuck in these ideas of ourselves. Like we see ourselves in a certain way. And when that image isn't validated,
Mm.
um, or, if we see ourselves a certain way, and then if it doesn't come to fruition or it's not as good as we thought it should be, then nobody's a more awful critic than self.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sits there, right? So then every single time a situation in your future or something happens or in your today present, something happens that feels slightly like the feeling back then, it can
Mm.
be hugely triggering.
Mm-hmm.
I've just
Yeah,
seen that so much.
there's something really, really interesting in that idea is like uh when I sort of felt transported back in time to
Mhm.
like kind of how I felt and how maybe my thinking models back then, they kind of came back pretty quick once I
Oh,
saw that
interesting.
image and kind of got transported back. Um
Mm.
it's it's oddly comforting to think and feel some of those old patterns even though they're not healthy.
Absolutely.
Like, I was really surprised. I'm like, I kind of like got transported back. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what it was like back then. And I kind of felt like almost like I was like comfortable with it,
Reminiscing. Yeah, like
reminiscing of it.
reminiscing on a
Not that I
on a
like
past.
missed it, but I was like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I remember, wearing this pair of pants, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's what
exactly.
this felt like.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
really interesting going through that because um, and I did have a bit of texting conversation with him after he sent that,
Mm.
and I
Later
told him
in the
I was
day.
triggered. Yeah, later in the day, I told him I was triggered by
Oh,
that
you
image, and
did?
that was yeah.
Oh.
And
What was his
he's like, "Oh,
response to that?
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that was like like a sore spot." And I was
Oh,
like, "Well,
really?
yeah." It's just
Huh.
like it also reminded me just how sometimes oblivious and weird he is. It's all good though. But it's not I was like my response was like, like, "Don't be sorry." It is actually, like, okay to be reminded of the
I think
past.
it's actually very
Um,
helpful to be reminded of the
yeah,
past, to
so I
be
was
fair.
like, "Don't be sorry about that." It is good. It was good to be reminded, and, like, I didn't mind it at all, even though it did, kinda knock me off kilter for a little bit. Um, so
What
there is some good of going back, I guess, and and kind of remembering what that time was like.
Well, I think it's all in how you process that. And
Mm,
because you just said it was fine and it wasn't fine. It was very upsetting for you until you processed it,
hmm
you know?
Yeah. So if I wouldn't
Because you
have,
took,
if I wouldn't have really sat with it and thought about it for a
right,
while,
right,
it probably would have wrecked more than my day.
right. Yeah. But don't you think that that's the huge lesson in all of this stuff? It's like when something happens in our past that is hugely defining,
Mhm.
these defining moments in our lives that alter the course of either who we are or how we think or how we have relationships. Um, there's pain involved with that.
Mhm.
And people don't like pain.
Mm.
No one wants pain. In personal growth, you see it all the time. People just want that feel good, fake it till you make it. That's what it's all about. But the truth of the matter is that real personal growth and deep spiritual, emotional growth happens when something is painful.
Mhm.
And I think so, like the reflection piece of that is so interesting. And I think too, it's a little PTSD when it hits you when you aren't like out of left field. It wasn't you going through your memory box. That wasn't
Right.
you
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
for pictures.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it just kind of, so you had no awareness that that was coming. So there's a shock value to that too, which I think
Mhm.
is some of that PTSD stuff
Yep.
because it reminds you of that pain. And then when you internalize that a little further and really think through um, not just the pain part, but also the subsequent changes that happened after that,
Mm.
that's where the huge gift is.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. For me, you're right. The PTSD and the
Hmm.
timing. It's always funny, the timing. It's like, I was like literally in just like a regular meeting with my current leadership team who all gets along super well. And I'm like, ding. I looked down, I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding. Like, I didn't even look at the text. I didn't even open it for like 2 hours.
Oh, you just saw the name and that was that.
I saw the name and then I just like left that. This is, again,
Oh,
I don't want to be like super dramatic about it, but like
it's not
that's how
being
much it
dramatic.
affects me. Like I
Yeah.
saw it. I just like, I can't even open this like
Mm-hmm.
now. And then a few hours
Mm-hmm.
later I opened it and then it was like that weird picture and I'm like, and then that was,
Mm.
that was it. But
You,
you're right.
you
Like
know what?
it was
The,
not
but
me going to explore. It came
no.
out of left field, so that it had like a little bit of extra like shock and awe value just in
Hmm.
that way.
Yeah. I think to me, like putting on my coaching hat, though you're not asking me to, or probably maybe even wanting me to.
This whole
Um,
this whole podcast is just you giving me free coaching advice. You didn't realize that this is the way I duped you into free professional coaching for myself.
I I feel like the amount of gut punch
Hmm.
that you experience with this situation every time is an indicator of what I would say is almost fear, and
Mm.
it's fear of um, fear that he can do damage, fear that this situation can hurt me, like because it did for so long,
Mm.
and it affected all parts of your life. It wasn't just your business; it was your personal
Yeah, yeah,
friendship because you
yeah.
guys had been kid best friends, and um, I mean, no wonder you have this trigger because it does conjure up that instantaneous like, oh, I recognize this feeling and I'm scared there's going to be consequences. There's going to be huge consequences to this interaction
Mm.
because there usually was,
Hmm.
you know, whether it be a blowout
Yep.
or whether it be a financial problem or whether it be employees getting disgruntled or, whatever.
Yep.
It just, and, um, like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just recognize that that's what that is and that to reframe it in a more timely fashion to say, oh, this is why I have this strong
Mm.
reaction. And there's nothing here that would
Yeah.
leave any mark like
Yeah.
it used to.
100% you're right. It is that initial is a fear reaction.
Yeah.
Like I was definitely just scared to open the text because I'm like, I don't know, who knows what's in this.
Yeah. 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 And what are the consequences of this? I mean,
Yeah.
but
So
don't you
you're
think
absolutely right. But I like the idea of trying to reframe that. And so
yeah.
just to round out the story, then I did text him back because I was like, it's rude to not text him back. Because I didn't want to
Yeah,
be
right.
rude, but I did let the thing sit there all day long. Texted him last night, just like something back, and then he and I had like a pretty pleasant conversation back and forth for like a half hour.
Mm.
Um,
That's
and
nice.
and so it actually turned out much better than I thought at noon when I had that gut punch, like you said, to 9 o'clock at night when I actually did have a conversation. Like it turned out to be a good conversation. So
well, which is awesome, right? Because you decided you were going to go in anyway. You were like,
yep.
This makes me uncomfortable. I'm going in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool because that's showing that's courageous. That's being courageous in your fear. I mean, it's just, and it sounds, I know I don't mean to sound like Freud. I always don't like
totally on the couch.
I don't like, don't you remember when we used to have those two couches at the co-working space, and whenever we were trying to sort things out, we would both flop on a couch and look at the ceiling? Yeah. Let's solve this is definitely a 2 orange couch day. That's what we should call it. Weren't they orange? I think they were orange.
It might have been orange, yeah.
Or black. Maybe they were black. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't know. I just think this is such a good conversation, though, because I think that we all have these big experiences that have created huge growth in us, and that they only came through being very painful. Like I always say, you can't experience great joy unless you've experienced equal and opposite great pain. You can only experience the height of joy to the amount of pain that you've had. That's it. Because you have nothing to compare it to otherwise. Yep. And in these situations, they leave these really deep marks for us. And we grow from them, and we decide to be different, and we, create different relationships, and we create different thinking patterns and decide different things for ourselves. And yet, if we're reminded of that, it's like no one wants to be reminded of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of like, we've talked about like childhood trauma before. And that one seems like kind of like a very like accessible thing for people. Like they kind of get like growing up's hard. You kind of have some like growing up trauma, whether it was like parents or school or whatever. And then you kind of carry that into adulthood. Well, that same pattern happens when you're an adult and keeps carrying forward. And it's sometimes easy to like not really recognize that your like adult trauma is like carrying forward with you too.
I have a huge example of that. I have a real life example of that. When I was little, there were times in my life, my mom was a single parent. There were times in my life when we actually had like food insecurity. We had no money. It was just she and I was an only child. And it was very, very topsy-turvy. There was no real consistency for a really long time. And as an only child, it makes no sense that whenever I'm cooking for my family or one extra person comes, I literally make enough food as though I am an old-fashioned cook in a logging camp. Like it's a big joke in my family. Literally, it's a huge joke in my family. And we've always kind of had a little fun with it. Well, everybody has fun with it at my expense. However, this is super crazy. Last week, my daughter because she's amazing with food prep and grocery shopping. Like she plans her meals and goes every week, decides what she needs at the grocery store, and only buys what she needs. And I was like, wow, that is so messed up, Megan. Anyway, she said, I realized that I have this weird pattern that I don't think that there will be enough. And I don't know where I got that pattern. That's what she said. And I went, oh, that was me. That was me. So now as an adult, I don't buy one jug of peanut butter. I buy two. I don't buy one thing of chicken. I'll buy 4 kinds of chicken so that I have them in the freezer. And that is a carryover.
Yeah.
Same exact thing.
Yep.
It's a childhood trauma that I was not even really aware that as an adult, I was behaving in a way to support that trauma. Isn't that interesting? Both of us had like this, wow, we both were like, wow, and it's a deep subject, and it could be, it could be awful to talk about it, but I don't see it as awful. Like, I see this as this like huge opportunity to recognize something in a pattern that I never even would have thought of had she not said, I don't know where I get this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that was me. Sorry.
It's pretty amazing how many generations some of that stuff can carry forward.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And this is your example of kind of breaking the cycle, like recognizing it and then being able to probably break that cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also explains why I'm always very interested in like, even like second, oh God, I can never remember the name of the place.
Second Harvest Heartland. That place.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. Because
the food shelf stuff. We'll just say it's simpler.
Well, 1 in 6 Minnesotans have food insecurity right now in our state. 1 in 6. And to think about it like that, it's like, wow. So so that would be a reason why you know what? Honestly, JJ, never even noticed that's why. I never noticed it.
That's why you volunteer for all those organizations.
Feed my starving children. Yeah. Yep. It's all part of that. It just feels really good to do something on a grander scale, but not really realizing how deeply tied I was because of some childhood trauma.
Yeah. Yep.
So yes, they go very, very deep. And so that's why I think it's such a gift when you can recognize something like this. It's such a gift. It's not a bad thing. It's not a judgment. It's like, wow, how amazing, because now you can choose what to do with it and you can clear yourself of that.
Yep. And I like what you said, like reframe it. You can start reframing things and then they don't become so scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Because some of this stuff is scary if you look at it just from the pain perspective and what it was, at that time in your life. It was scary and it was stressful and it was very painful, but it isn't now.
Yep. Wow. What a good coaching session, Melissa. Thank you.
I feel like I coached myself too. Well, it's interesting for people to recognize when they are triggered by the past, like just bringing this home, I would say for listeners, that sucker gut punch is the greatest indicator of something is triggering you. And it is usually from your past, and it usually is fear related in some sort. And if you can just sit right with that instead of run from it, like lots of us do, because we just don't want to deal. If you can just sit with it for a little bit and ask yourself some questions, gosh, it's just amazing how quickly you can make it just dissipate and move on.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well. Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them.
We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring.